joining us, we're here on Progressive Insider. I'm Don Ford.
I'm Jimmy Sunderland.
And we are here to talk about progressive news.
Yes.
So right off the bat, let's just get started. Everyone's freaking out. DNC appointments.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Scary.
Scary stuff. I think that on paper, it's even scarier before we really look at what's going on. But we definitely see that if there were to be a rig, this would be the first steps.
Yes.
Will actually be like the 6th, 7th, and 8th. But these are the first ones we would see.
Yes.
That's important.
Hopefully we're more prepared than we were in 2016. So
I know we're more prepared than 2016. So, because this time there isn't we, except for the scattered us that we used to have.
yeah.
So this time we're coming around, though, and the DNC has recently appointed the Tom Perez appointments. The chair gets to make these appointments, right? So there's 25 appointments, 4 vice chairs, and 2 co-chairs. Now, those 2 co-chairs basically, and all those people, is 31 votes, which on paper, you're like, this is terrible. And a lot of these people are lobbyists, and John Podesta, which is, what were they thinking? I mean,
Now,
really?
co-chairs are like leaders of the committees, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They run the committee. They decide what's going to happen and when what's going to happen. So it does give a certain level of control over the whole proceedings in that regard.
Right. And Tom Perez is the one that's been assigning them?
Yes, and that's part of the rules and bylaws. It's called the call to order for the DNC convention, and I think it's in Section 7, where they explain that he gets to appoint a certain amount of people at a certain time, which is right now. If they were officiated, it's a rubber stamp at the e-board. Now, people are going to say this is the committees being leveraged to some degree.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it does sound like it. To some degree, that's true. But luckily, these people only represent a small portion of the actual votes that we're going to see in these committees.
Okay.
They actually represent 19.01% of the total vote. The funny thing is that in order to get an active quorum, you need 20%.
Oh.
So they alone are not an active quorum in order to pass amendments. Well, because there is a fear and there is a concern that the superdelegate reform will be undone, that during the rules and bylaws process, which is the next time the convention rules can be addressed, they will strike the eligibility.
Right. I remember you saying something about the footnote, putting it in a footnote, right?
Right. They were basically trying to take the rule that had who was eligible to vote on the first ballot, which was saying pledged delegates are the only ones. It was actually what it actually said was, it said eligible delegates up here, but down here it said only pledged delegates are eligible on the first ballot.
Right.
So this is the kind of thing that if you just strike that one footnote, it doesn't change the eligibility for the entire DNC process.
Okay.
But once you fold it into the rule, then there's no way to take it out without destroying the whole process by which we determine eligibility in the first place.
Right.
Which would be kind of an ironic problem considering.
Yes. And then that would be meshing in the delegates and the superdelegates as well if we keep that in the footnote.
Yeah, which is going to happen if there is a second ballot, which hasn't happened in a very, very, very long time. If there is a second ballot, everyone is free to vote however they want. So I think that's why it's so important that people think about how they're treating other candidate supporters. But, big but, when it comes to this particular race, I think that no one really expected the Bernie movement to be as strong as it would be in Iowa, where he's still doing marathon events.
And he's not even there.
Yeah. He's not even there. He's doing marathon events. And then when he is there, he works harder than anyone I've ever seen. And so it really is a matter of they underestimated how much this would actually help him, because it shows the power of the not me, us concept.
Absolutely.
I'm not a big fan of the losing the individual. I think it dabbles in communism a little more than I'm a big fan of. Because I think you have to take care of. That's why we're doing this, right? We're doing this for you. We're doing this for you. We're doing this for me and us and everyone. That's what us means. So it's important to really distinguish that that we have this team, this group of people out there doing it, and if it's hurting anyone, it's hurting Warren. The fallout is that the people that Warren lost, because Warren needs to be there making those one-on-one, right? She relies on one-on-one personal connection. That means she has to shake their hands. She's got to take that selfie. She has to be there in person. What isn't happening during the impeachment?
She's not going out there.
She's not shaking hands and shaking babies.
Nope.
Actually, surprisingly, The fallout after the whole progressive divide is that the loss that Warren is feeling from having been on the impeachment is actually going to Amy Klobuchar.
Really? So Amy Klobuchar is getting more votes?
Amy Klobuchar has gone up almost the exact amount that Elizabeth Warren's gone down.
But why?
Because of the environment and not liking Bernie so much. So they want a female candidate. They love the environment. Biden, Pete, and all of them aren't environment enough. Amy apparently has a good environmental platform. I don't know. I haven't looked. And I honestly haven't looked. But this is an important moment for progressives out there trying to get to their candidate, because Warren is losing these people and they're not going where we need them to go. The problem here comes down to whether or not we've been inclusive enough to Warren supporters that they'll look at Bernie's climate plan to see that it's far superior to Amy Klobuchar's. So what it really comes down to is it's an inclusivity issue.
Yeah, and we've actually prepared a report that gives a really good example as to what us progressives go deal with on a regular basis, and hopefully it could give us a new perspective on how to build our majority.
We'll be right back.
During the 2020 presidential cycle, the slogan, "Vote Blue no matter who," has been championed by establishment Democrats who point towards the risk of re-electing Trump as justification for what is effectively a coercive attack. These same individuals espouse the long-debunked narrative that Bernie supporters are responsible for Trump being in the White House. But with a little investigation, we can determine the truth of these types of narratives. Vote Blue No Matter Who had its roots before 2020, having manifested in 2016 as a petition in response to another popular Democratic-related petition. In this case, the response may have done more damage to the 2016 Democratic nominee than previously realized. The push to support any candidate who may become the nominee, no matter who they were or what policy positions they claimed to support, started as a response to the Bernie or Bust petition, and the lack of post-mortem on the 2016 presidential race helped these theories run unabated. The perpetuation of these fallacies has allowed more division to be sown on the left by consultants manipulating existing negative sentiment grown during the primary. For an example of an architect of centrist tactics such as these, look no further than to crossover consultants such as David Brock. We may not be able to associate it with him directly in 2016, but the case can easily be made in 2020. The Vote Blue No Matter Who slogan began to roll out shortly after a meeting coined as, I kid you not, the Stop Sanders Breakfast. When you reflect on this point in 2016, the Bernie or Bust movement was in full swing, and the establishment consultants knew, despite what some were saying on Twitter, that they needed Bernie supporters. Instead of actually taking the time to meet the needs of progressives around the country, a phrase was created to simplify and shame anyone who stood against a nominee who had the cards stacked unfairly in her favor. To be blunt, it was created to sheepdog progressives to vote for a candidate that supported corporate policies instead of progressive ones. The 2016 primary was ultimately a protest against that exact corruption, and fortunately, the DNC agreed. With the passing of the superdelegate reform in 2018, it was a small step, but still a step in the right direction, as it empowers local Democrats to grow their party and have their voices heard before party leaders cast a vote that could obscure thousands of hours of collective volunteer work. After having lost over 1,200 elected seats, the party was finally moving toward a future where the divisive ideas that had been losing Democrats their elections might finally be a thing of the past, and something only brought up to remind ourselves of what not to do if we want to win. Unfortunately, this thought process didn't end in 2016 or begin again organically. Like all things in politics, this was manufactured then and again now. The Stop Sanders Breakfast was reported by the New York Times in April of 2019. This article highlighted the high-level Democratic Party members and operatives in attendance. Among the notable attendees at the event were Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Pete Buttigieg, and consultant David Brock. Not only did they restart the Vote Blue No Matter Who, but they gave new life to the misguided belief that it was the Bernie or Bust movement that cost Democrats the 2016 general election. This idea had mostly died out as it was easily disproved in 2017, and after the progressive gains in 2018 was beginning to be thought of as a dark moment in our party's history many would like to forget. Now, it is true that as early as 2017, comprehensive studies have been released showing that voters in crucial pivot counties voted for Obama twice, then Sanders during the primary, and then Trump or no vote in 2016. It should be said that the rate of the drop-off in 2016 was far less than the amount of Clinton supporters who refused to vote for Obama in 2008. Based on this statistic alone, it would be easy to make the misguided argument that Bernie or bust voters were responsible for her loss. This single data point by itself does make the case that non-voting independents did in fact cost the Democrats the 2016 general election. However, the simple fact is you can't make the entire conclusion based on a single data point. But consultants who want to manipulate voting blocks will make you think that we can. But at the end of the day, politics is, after all, a game of fractions. UMass professor Brian Schaffner released data disputing the Bernie bro culpability assertion. Schaffner noted that in an election this close, any number of voting blocks could have proved decisive. Schaffner also suggested some voters were in Sanders' reach that were out of Clinton. The pool of eligible voters who chose not to vote is actually a very diverse group that represents many different demographics and areas. Brilliant Maps released startling findings in 2016 highlighting just how much of an issue this really is. The largest voting bloc at 46% now considers themselves independent. This represents voters' loss in faith with their party leaders and candidates. Voters are simply making a choice to not cast a vote or undervoting in key races. This did not vote group in the 2016 presidential race vastly outnumbered all other votes. This means that this group is not a single voting bloc, and the problem exists in both major parties. If we look at this the way a business views its product sales, not only would this usually trigger a change in leadership, but it also sends a clear message that consumers are not interested in what either party is trying to sell them. What began as a vote blue no matter who unity call now has largely faded. Why? What's changed? The Sanders campaign is gaining momentum with the largest small dollar donation totals, millions of volunteers, and the rising poll numbers in key election states. And consequently, the former sheepdogging term has transformed into an alarm of panic among the elite and politicos. If you want to attack this problem directly, the number one thing you can do is stop saying these consultants' names at all and deny them the credit for any activity they may be able to profit from later. These consultants aren't brilliant strategists, but are simply opportunists preying on the grassroots for ideas that already have traction, and then charging candidates and parties for their overpriced and overrated services. And remember, these types of consultants have no game in Democrats winning because they get paid either way, and as they've been heard saying, business is good when Democrats are losing. In addition to that, make sure progressive candidates win by promoting positive interactions and growing your movement both locally and nationally. Ultimately, the true fault lies in the Democratic Party's leadership for putting up uninspiring candidates who push a broken status quo that has failed the vast majority of Americans. Let's be reasonable, though. Perpetuating a vote Democrat no matter who is not a flawed approach for Democratic leadership after the primary. Many are even required to do so, but they do need to recognize that they may no longer have independent support. It's important to also distinguish that this rallying cry during the primary is only the part that we see, while behind the scenes, it's accompanied by behavior that discourages critical volunteers, voters, and donors alike. Democrats need to grow the party, and they do that by making independent voters who identify as progressives feel comfortable, not just voting for the party, but taking party positions because they don't just need their votes, they need independents' time to volunteer, making calls and knocking on doors. To get their time, it matters who the candidate is because these voters don't just vote blue. It matters who.
My takeaway from this is that the bullying tactic that independents feel from vote blue no matter who could actually be connected to some of the bullying that other candidates are saying they're feeling, especially from hard feelings from 2016.
Absolutely.
So we need to grow this majority and we need to be inclusive. Do you think that maybe we just need to take a little bit of our own advice that we wish people would be nice to us?
Yeah, this is a look in the mirror situation. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Interesting. All right. Well, there you have it. We'll be right back.
Her second child, and instead of the health problems getting better, they got worse.
Oh no.
She could only eat maybe like 2 or 3 things, like at all. She could eat apples and she could eat a few almonds.
And this is while she's actively pregnant, right?
This was after she had had a child.
Oh,
She was
after.
breastfeeding and looking after a toddler.
Wow.
And she
Wow. So she had the
barely
second
eat.
child. Now this illness is progressing. It's more
Yeah.
thing.
And
There's less things on.
it was
Okay,
getting-
so
yeah.
how does this go? I mean, how
It
is
was
she's
getting-
alive right now, right? So what
yes,
happened?
Yes. So she was getting worse and worse, and she lost 80 pounds in about 6 months, and her hair was falling out, and basically she was dying of starvation, because even when she would eat things, her body couldn't digest them.
Right.
Not
So
only
there's
that-
like wow.
Not only that, but then our children started having these very odd ailments. My children started getting these bizarre skin rashes that just wouldn't heal. My 18-month-old started having seizures, and the doctor had no clue why, and they just stopped.
That's got to be
And the doctors had
terrifying
no
as a
clue
parent.
why.
I can't even imagine. I'm a parent. I can't even imagine going through that. Now, you weren't having any symptoms or anything, right?
So I was, my main symptoms were that when I would come home every day, I couldn't breathe. Within 30 minutes of coming into our neighborhood, I could not breathe through my nose. I was going through, I was buying nasal spray in bulk just to be able to breathe.
Well, we see where this
I
is
had
going. I can tell you where this
Yeah.
goes. There's an air quality issue, and your kids and your wife are living in it full time. That's got to be terrifying.
Exactly. I got out of the neighborhood, and when I was at work, I was fine. When I would go back to the house, I couldn't breathe. I would start coughing. I would start sneezing, and things were just getting worse and worse and worse. Well, I graduated. I finished my PhD, and I got a job. So I was actually making a bit of money. So my wife and I, put all of our money together. We had no clue why she was sick. She was going to ever more invasive tests every, few weeks.
Eventually, the tests start taking their toll on the person because they do get more invasive. Invasive is the key word for that, because bone marrow eventually has to be pulled.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing was, one of the symptoms that my wife had was transient anemia. So one day she would go and get her blood tested, she would be anemic. She would go back a couple weeks later, her blood would be fine. She would go back another couple of weeks, she would be anemic again. There was all of these very bizarre symptoms that nobody could tell us what was happening. Well, I had managed to save up enough money in a year that we put a down payment on a house, and we moved. And after we were at our new place for about 2 weeks, all of the skin rashes on the kids cleared up. I could breathe again. For years, I had to be on a CPAP machine. Suddenly, my sleep apnea was just gone.
Wow.
We didn't know why, but something had changed, right? Well, then about 2 weeks later, while I was at work, so I work in drug design. So I design novel chemotherapeutics and anti-inflammatory drugs. That's what my job was when I got out of grad school. So I was working.
Thank you for that, by the way, because that's something that saves lives. If you're in drug manufacturing design, people aren't necessarily like, oh, is that right? What kind of opioids are you working with? And you're like, no, there's a lot of medicine out there.
Yeah, but so my wife called me and told me about an article that she had just read that our community was being exposed to a chemical called ethylene oxide.
Oh.
And I said, hang on a second, I don't know what that is, but I work in drug discovery. I'm sure somebody here knows what that is. And so I went and I asked everyone that I worked with, hey, have you ever heard of ethylene oxide? You ever heard of ethylene oxide? And I ran into a couple of people that said, oh yeah, I've heard of it. And I said, well, there's this article that just came out that our community might be being exposed. And when they went through all of the symptoms that they had seen as workers that had worked with ethylene oxide, they were all of the symptoms that my family and I had been.
Which you're not going to train a doctor, and a doctor is not going to know this sort of stuff.
Exactly.
It's not a natural. If they had a list of every chemical ailment and everything possible, you can't search it that way.
It was in the fall of 2018 when this happened.
Oh, okay. So this was last year.
is
So
happening.
this is going on still. And so this is where you get into the talk
happening.
of environmental racism,
Yes,
because
this is
you
where we
guys
start
had the
talking
position to move because you were in a transient position, much like her anemia, in the sense that you weren't going to be there permanently. You were in a transition point in your life.
Yeah.
So you could leave. But many people can never get out of those places. They're stuck where they are.
Yeah. They're one of the things that myself and other academics in the environmental justice movement, other scientists have tried to put forward is that it's one thing to talk about this, about something that's over there. And honestly, usually how we talk about environmental issues or the environment is something that's over there, like either over there's a problem, or over there is land or something that needs to be conserved. But
which is just a shortcut. It's just a shortcut for not my problem. That's all that is.
And what environmental justice insists upon is that no, the environment as an issue is something that happens where we live, where we work, and where we spend our time. And this is all the environment, and this is what we need to be focused on.
Wow, not our problem. So this is in Illinois. Is this a Republican problem?
Actually, no. Their representatives are all Democrats.
What?
Yes. It appears that, and they get into this a little bit more in the story, and you can see our whole interview on the Progressive Center website, Facebook, YouTube. Smash all the likes, hit all the buttons, check those out. You'll see the long form. It's about an hour long, 45 minutes at least, where we discuss in great detail everything that he went through. But what it really comes down to is that, and this is the most shocking part, I think, is that the plant had been open and affecting a more affluent white area. Well, those people are all donors, and they called and they complained and they got the plant moved. So this plant wasn't set up here accidentally to poison these people.
So it's on purpose?
It appears to be intentional. It appears that they chose this particular place because these people are not donors. These are less affluent areas. They're less likely to complain. They're less likely to have health care. They're less likely to have all the things. They're more likely to die more quickly from the problem. And this is where environmental justice and racial justice really just smash into becoming one giant,
that's what it sounds like.
Horrible problem.
Yeah.
And something really has to. I think that people, we don't really think of these problems as something that's like real or something that is our problem. Like we said, this is someone else's problem. No, this is our problem. These are our people. I'm really hoping that something can be done.
Yeah, these are human beings. So
they deserve to be treated as such.
Yep.
All right.
And we'll be back.
All right, so welcome back. So you know that we've been saying a lot today about being nice to people and other candidates and building majorities, and it all sounds great, except what, am I trying to sheepdog people? Am I trying to be nice? Do I want people to put on kid gloves for everybody and just let everyone get away with everything they're doing?
No.
Thank you.
Of course not.
But it would be nice to have some type of example.
Yes.
To see firsthand maybe something that Bernie Sanders did that makes the point on how we can win people over. Now, what if we had a video to prove everything that I'm saying?
That would be actually kind of cool.
Right. Well, a couple weeks ago, you remember Bernie had that event in Venice Beach.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And we caught Assemblyman Tina Desiree Berg and I, who I do the podcast with.
Oh, I love her.
We caught Assemblyman Reggie Sawyer-Jones, who was a former Kamala Harris supporter and a Hillary supporter.
The one from LA, right?
That's right.
Right,
The one
okay.
from LA.
Yes.
And he was there to speak to endorse a candidate, which would seem a little bit endorsing Bernie Sanders.
Wow, he wasn't there to support Kamala, obviously.
No,
That's actually kind of cool.
Right? So we caught him, and he explained to us why he chose to support Bernie.
Okay. I can't wait to see it.
Have a look.
Assemblymember Reginald Byron Jones Sawyer Sr.,
They always do.
a.k.a. Tio Reggie.
Like I said, they always do the introductions better themselves. So we're here at a Bernie Sanders rally,
Yes.
and I couldn't help but notice that you had mentioned that you were not a Bernie Sanders supporter. So you supported a separate candidate. Since you don't need to say who, we already know who it is.
Okay.
There's only one. Yeah, we'll save you the trouble. But what was it that made you come around? We heard it in your speech up there, but what was it that really made you feel the burn?
So Bernie Sanders came to me when I was a Harris supporter, and he asked me that if she drops out, would I consider him as his second choice? Smart move. One, that was a smart move. It was a brilliant move, for one. Two, then we had a one-on-one conversation. Who has a one-on-one conversation with someone that's already endorsed someone
It's
else?
hard to believe someone cares about being someone's number two. That it means so much to Bernie.
But also made me feel like he really wanted my support. He went out of his way to say it. And then we started talking about each of the issues, and I realized as I sat up there, I started to feel the burn. It was a little bit at a time, and it started to get hot.
It's a tingle.
And it started to get hotter and hotter. And when we started about criminal justice, we started talking about prescription drugs. My mother spent $3,000 in 1 month for some heart medicine.
Oh my God,
And it wasn't until my sister and I got involved to get Obamacare for
She
her.
didn't even know, right?
She didn't even know.
No, yeah.
She didn't know. We're about to lose our home behind
I actually
drug
want to ask you a question. You mentioned that at one time you were a big Hillary Clinton supporter, or Clinton supporter, period. What was the first part of losing your religion as far as realizing that the Clintons weren't the president that they claimed to be?
So I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay.
My uncle was one of Little Rock Nine, one of the 9 kids that integrated Central High School in 1957. Bill Clinton has done a lot for my family. I've known them for quite some time. I think my family's known them for it. So it's more of a family friend issue, which is why I'm always going to be grateful for them. Plus, he honored my uncle when no other president would honor what those 9 brave kids did to integrate, so that I could go to USC and to Harvard with nobody getting in my way. And so the fact that he honored my family, it's
That's a deep tie.
It's deep tie.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's
something you don't
incredible.
let
Right.
go of.
Think about it. I supported Hillary Clinton over the first African American president. That means I'm very loyal. You know? So I would be unbelievably loyal to Bernie now.
Can we say one more thing before we get out of here? Your passion is criminal justice reform.
Yes.
And what is it about Bernie Sanders' plan with criminal justice reform that really speaks to you? And what do you think will speak about it to other people that are that important to them?
So Senator Sanders really talks about rehabilitation.
Okay.
He looks at every individual or people that you're not permanently scarred. There is no, you're probably young, but there used to be a movie called The Bad Seed, where it kind of says that if you're a child and you do bad things, you'll do that for the rest of your life. I don't believe that. I mean, I don't believe that. And with the right rehabilitation, whether it's drug abuse, education, let me break it down to you this way. When I became chair of public safety budget, every private prison came into my office and said that they needed 10,000 prison beds over the next 10 years. I said, what algorithm did you use? Because my kids are really smart in math. Because I don't know what algorithm is. But anyway, what algorithm is it? He said, we can tell 100% by the number of third graders that can't read at third grade how many more prison beds you'll need.
Wow.
So I said, being from South LA, from the 59th Assembly District, let's educate them so we can figure out how many more college seats we need to build. They've never come back to my office since then. And that was in 2012. So that tells me education.
Yeah, it's such a failure in policy.
Right.
And Assemblyman, thank you so much.
Right.
So, wow, that was a completely different wow from the first wow. I really have to say that I think that there is a really good life lesson in this, as in our culture has kind of been this thinking of you're either first or you're last. Like, as in number two has always been a bad thing, but this kind of shows that there's a longevity to number two, and there's actually a persistence and a dedication. And I kind of really have a even higher respect for Bernie and him because of this, and showing that there's a better way to being a number two than losing. So
there's a lot of people, and I do have a hard limit on, like, his VP choice, for example. My only rule is it can't be a Hillary superdelegate. So I do have some hard feelings, of course.
Right.
I'm like, no. But other than that, I think that, Bernie really shows the best example for how to be and get these people, get these folks, right? We don't say people anymore.
yes.
Get these folks on board with, the movement and the inclusivity of the party that we're trying to join. We're trying to build this thing. We're trying to build this movement. We're trying to include everyone, and we only do that by building a majority.
Right.
And we don't build a majority by alienating people. We don't build a majority by making people feel like we're an exclusive group. And yeah, we're going to be dealing with people who are going to say, we're doing all these terrible things. We're these terrible people. And that's why it's so important that we write on things like the internet. Like, we're not speaking to the person we're arguing with, but we're speaking to all those lurkers out there that aren't going to comment, that are going to read that and make a decision.
Right. Absolutely.
So I'd say, if there's one piece of advice going into Iowa, and there's one piece of advice going into this primary that I could give anybody, is think about what you're putting online, because when you put that Bernie slogan on your photo, you're representing more than just yourself.
Be mindful. Absolutely.
We'll be right back.
We come in peace.
All right, we're back, and that's it for us. That's the end of our first show. Thank you for watching our inaugural episode of Progressive Insider.
Yes, and you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Medium, and YouTube.
And any other social media that you can think of. I'm sure there's going to be more, but seriously, check it out. We have some really great content. Any interview you're seeing here, there's a long-form interview of everything we do. We've got a bunch of fun stuff coming up. It's not just a couple people. It's really a whole team of people coming together. So thank you again. And, you know what we forgot to mention in there?
Hmm.
The Patreon. It's coming. Don't forget.
Yeah, it'll be coming soon.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.